Hello everyone and welcome to the 5 biggest mistakes that people often make when balancing their strength and endurance training, belovedly known as hybrid training here on the internet. I'm currently training for a 500-pound deadlift and mile under 5 minutes total, utilising a lot of the same principles that I used in 2020 when I became one of 2 people in the world to have squatted 500 pounds and ran a sub 5-minute mile in the same day. The lessons that I've taken from that, along with the lessons and conversations I've had with Omnia Performance athletes over the past couple of years, we've been fortunate enough to have over 4,000 hybrid athletes come through our doors for us to look after, which means that we've got a pretty good grip on what the common mistakes are, what the common pinch points are, what people are doing right, what people are doing wrong, and the general lay of the land in terms of what things could be improved upon. So in today's video, I'm gonna lift some things off the ground and then I'm gonna go to the track later. And in amongst that, we're gonna go through those 5 points. Okay, so I am first of all trying not to do that thing with a bottle of liquid chalk where you squeeze so hard and end up creating a river of it. Success. As I am preparing for my top set. So I have 195 kilos for 3 sets of 2 and then a 4th set which is going to be an AMRAP set. My hamstring is feeling a little bit niggly for an unknown reason in my warm-up, so let's hope that it just remains niggly and is absolutely fine. So without any further ado, before we jump into point number 1, why don't we see how my first of 4 working sets is looking on deadlifts in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so point number 1, and arguably the biggest mistake that people make when hybrid training, is taking 100% of a running or triathlon plan and 100% of a lifting plan and going like that. And I don't know about you, but I don't often expect myself to be able to operate at 200% capacity in the same way that by using 2 very familiar objects, if you take 5 kilos and 5 kilos, it does not equal 5 kilos, it equals 10 kilos. In the same way that if we have 100% output to give in terms of our maximum recoverable volume within the context of a week, and we put ourselves through 200%, then it's not going to be very long before we're feeling burnt out, exhausted, or maybe even saying you can't balance strength and endurance training like a lot of people have done over the years. So hybrid training is not about doing more, it's about turning up certain dials, turning down certain dials, cutting out the junk volume, and making your training focused and intentional. You want each training session, each rep, each set to have intent and a purpose, and that's where sensible and focused programming is the number 1 best thing that you can do for your hybrid training goals. Okay, set number 2. First one felt pretty speedy. My hamstring is not all that pleased, but it doesn't feel like it's gonna snap, so that's good enough for me. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Ooh, right, last set, best set, and all that. Oh, I'm falling. And that's mistake number 2, don't fall over when deadlifting. You may well be shocked to hear that point number 2 is not actually don't fall over when deadlifting, albeit sound life advice in general. No, point number 2 is about randomization, and an important nuance to make is on the difference between hybrid training and CrossFit. And I've said this 1,000 times on this channel, on podcasts, on Instagram, on articles, etc., that there is a difference between the 2, but there's still comment sections online that can't quite see the distinction. So hybrid training is focusing on individual disciplines separately or concurrently that do not inherently support the development of one another. So powerlifting does not make you a better runner, running does not make you a better powerlifter, but if you are focusing on specific powerlifting goals alongside specific running goals and training them concurrently to progress forwards, that, ergo, is hybrid training. To the contrary, you have CrossFit, which is taking individual disciplines and blending them into an individual discipline in and of itself, is measured competitively on the execution of those blended disciplines. They require totally different training protocols. There is some overlap, yes, must be said, but the nuance between them is in the components that make up the output. CrossFit is a sport in and of itself. Hybrid is essentially a category, a methodology that allows people to develop individual disciplines simultaneously.
How dare you slander CrossFit?
Oh, it's not that simple, it's not that simple. It isn't that simple, it isn't that simple. Neither one is inherently better than the other. They are different disciplines. That is the main point that I want to make. But Randomization is something that people often fall into the trap of when hybrid training, because they're drawn to the shiny thing, the new thing, the WOD here, the WOD there, that class, what they're doing that day. When in reality, you need to be intentional, you need to be goal specific, because you are working at a compromised output of volume in however many disciplines you are training at once. So if you go from 100% powerlifting to powerlifting and running, you need to make an allocation, so to speak, for the running, which means that you need to be progressing and focusing your training as much as possible to the goal specific intentions that you have, so that all of your training sessions, all of the training stimulus you're looking for is moving you to that point. Randomization has a place. It can be good fun. It can be great for community interaction and having fun with people at WODs. But when it comes to specific hybrid training, multidisciplinary goals, it is unfortunately not the best way to reach them in the most effective time frame possible. What we're aiming to do is to optimize the suboptimal rather than further suboptimize the suboptimal. Hope that makes sense. There will be a follow-up video on this topic as a whole coming very soon. So if you want more context, drop your comments down below so that I can get to them in more detail in the future. But that is point number 2. I have an AMRAP set to do. Let's go. Let's do this. Leroy! Oh, it's not going to be that exciting, everyone. I apologize. I have hyped this up much more. Mind you, I should get in the zone. Eight reps. I'll do. Okay, so before we jump into point number 3, I thought I'd run you through the rest of this session just for continuity's sake. I have 3 sets of 5 at 160 kilos on deficit deadlifts, just to move them as quickly as I can, make them smooth, make them fast, improve my leg drive. Then I have 4 sets of 6 on front squats, and then 150 jumping lunges for time before a gap for the rest of the afternoon, early evening, before we head to the track. Oh Christ, that's pressing my ribs. Oh God, I hate deficit deadlifts. I hate front squats under fatigue. Oh, this is the worst part about my day, that's for sure. Okay, so point number 3 is another big one, and that is under eating. A lot of people that come from a lifting background, if you excuse the mild interruption, tend to have a pretty good understanding of what their maintenance calorie intake is and can get quite used to that over time. However, when you start to add in endurance volume, another brief interlude, you can easily find yourself under eating through increasing your expenditure in terms of your output on a week-to-week basis, which means that if you don't balance the books by increasing your calorie intake, then you are effectively going to be inadvertently putting yourself in a deficit. A very common mistake that people make. For example, you know that your maintenance is 3,000 calories and you eat that every day, and that's the best way that you can stay at the current body shape, body composition you're in. You then go to intervals on a Monday, tempo run on a Wednesday, and long run on a Saturday, and all of a sudden you've added in another 1,500 to 2,000 calories, give or take, obviously an estimation, on top of your 7 by 3,000 calories across the week. So if you're not eating a little bit more each day, or eating back the calories that you've burnt on the specific cardiovascular focused days, then you could be putting yourself into a deficit, which is going to make it harder to recover, harder to adapt, harder to build muscle, and harder to essentially move towards your specific, as we've already covered, goals. So do a little bit of a reassessment, a bit of an audit on your nutrition, and if you would like a total PowerPoint presentation focused breakdown on how to do exactly that from my perspective and the things that I've done over the past 5 years or so, then head to the video that is on the screen just here and is linked in the description down below. So don't fall into the trap of undereating, because you're going to be doing more work, which means you're going to need more fuel. Keep the furnace burning, and I have 6 minutes until I can refuel said furnace. I'm a train now, apparently. Hello, good evening. It is 7:25, a little bit later than I hoped to be here, and it's chillier than expected, which is a harsh reminder that I live in Scotland, where summer comes and goes about as quickly as I expect to be moving around this track this evening. And with that in mind, I wanted to touch upon how good I'm feeling today, and that is as a result of making conscious decisions last night to get to bed earlier and read a book before bed, because it's something I've got out of the habit of doing recently, and it's hurt me. And I track all that data through this thing here, which is my Whoop. And if you aren't aware of Whoop, it tracks your recovery, your sleep, and your strain. And I really like to focus on what I can do to influence my sleep and recovery score, because the mistake people often make is viewing this as the gospel on their wrist, all things health and fitness data, when in reality, I view it as one piece of a bigger ecosystem of things to consider, the things that we can influence to be able to recover better, sleep better, feel better. One of the favorite things that I like to do is use a journal, which is why I referred to reading before, and the journal inbuilt into Whoop allows me to track data over time, see what's good for me, see what's bad for me, see what best influences my sleep. Woke up with an 80% recovery score and a 95% sleep score this morning, which means that I can confidently say that my decision to go to bed before 10 p.m. last night, as always, has very positive outcomes. Just about to warm up for a mile at RP8-ish pacing, so kind of just a little bit slower than current mile ability, not max effort. I then have 5 minutes rest, and then I have 4x400 meters at the mile pacing that I've just done, with 2 minutes static rest between efforts. Essentially moving a decent pace, not quite full send, and just reiterating that over and over again to get used to the sort of gait, to get used to the sensation of moving at that pace, and just to drill and practice being able to get my head down and move without having to go every 5 seconds. So trusting the process and building some volume, because this will be, what will this be? 2 miles of total work on the track, moving at about 5:15 to 5:30 minute mile pace, I expect. I'm gonna get warmed up, and then we will jump into point number 4. Point number 4 is letting your ego win. Today's a great example. I have a hard effort mile. At lap 2, lap 3, I'm gonna be faced with a decision. Do I wanna stare at my watch and see that a PB might be within reach, a good time might be within reach, and I think abandon the plan, get my head down and go for it? No. I wanna stick to the plan, trust the process, focus on consistency over time, put my ego to the side, and stack bricks on bricks on bricks on bricks over time, because that's what hybrid progression is all about. It's about doing the honest work that's not all that glamorous and watching things build over time. We have a lot of conversations with people on the that just want to do everything, and unfortunately you probably can't do everything unless you're Bruce Wayne, which, unless you hello if you're watching, but if you're not Bruce Wayne, then it's probably going to be difficult. So the desire to do lots of things is great, I'm all for that, but I would encourage people to let curiosity and an eagerness to learn and the excitement for the unknown that comes with new disciplines to be what drives you, rather than the ego that goes with it, because that will stop us learning from people more experienced than us. It will stop us being a student when we need to be. It might make us complacent with some skills, like running is a skill. You can't just jump straight into it and expect to be moving quite as well as Kipchoge is going to be moving. You need to develop your gait and develop that over time. So whenever you find yourself wrestling with anything egotistical, I think balancing your training across a spectrum of real top end strength all the way to ultra endurance work and everything in between is where I've seen a huge amount of value. And the biggest thing that hybrid training has done for me is allowing me to let go of my ego, view things for what they are, see the value, see the lessons, take those, apply them to my training, but more importantly, apply them to my own day-to-day life, because ego is the enemy, and I think one of the fastest ways to make it your friend rather than foe is to come to terms with it and learn the lessons that you need to learn to become a better version of yourself within that context by doing the work, training. And now I've got a mile to do at a fairly challenging pace. .5:29. My asthma's playing up actually, which is a bit odd. Okay, mile complete, 5:29, which is pretty much exactly where I expected it to be, but there's a little bit of my ego crawling into the picture because I feel like it was a little bit harder than it should have been, but went into that session with the aim of just executing the plan rather than, oh, you're gonna run a sub 5 minute mile, get in the zone, really think about it, really think strategically. I sort of just set off and held what felt like a sustainable pace for as long as I could. 5:29 came up, happy day, successful training, job done, a couple more minutes rest now, then it is 4x400 meters at 5:30 minute per mile pace with 2 minutes static rest. contrast between efforts, and that is today's training complete. But before we round off the video, it's important to mention the fifth and final point of today's video, which is mistake number 5, not taking into account the body mass considerations that go with balancing strength and endurance training. And this comes from both ends of the spectrum. I'll speak predominantly from a strength bias point of view first, whereby if you are a heavier athlete due to having a higher muscle mass, you will likely have to take some things into mind like 2-in-1 shorts, chamois cream. Trail bags will be more difficult to fit on comfortably. You might be a little bit heavier on your feet, which means you need to be more cautious with redeveloping the skill of running, so not to make sure you're overstriding and putting a lot of stress through your knees, because if there's a lot of weight going through them, then you could cause yourself some wear and tear quicker than you might were you 20 kilos lighter. Along with that, as you have a higher body weight, body mass, muscle mass, your heat dissipation will likely be a bit higher, which means as your volume starts to build in endurance training, you'll likely need more grams of carbs per hour, you'll likely need more sodium, you'll likely need more fluids. And these are all things that if you go searching in running or triathlon forums online, the prescriptions you might be seeing there might not be as specific to you, a heavier athlete coming from a strength background who's also maintaining strength work. As well as that, the functional tightness that comes with fatigue from strength training means you might not have as much mobility in your swimming stroke, you might not have as much mobility in your hips, in your gait, things like this. So just be mindful of the fact that your body shape and the muscle that you've built isn't necessarily as conducive to some of the prescriptions you might find online or at local running clubs or triathlon clubs for the general populace that might not have the same body mass considerations as you. So no prescription from me other than to be mindful of it, take it into account, and make sure to remember that you are coming at things from a strength and endurance point of view, not just an endurance point of view. On the flip side, if you are coming from an endurance background into a more weight training focused background, then you are going to have to bear in mind that you might have a more limited understanding of the biomechanical movement patterns, you might have a longer range of motion due to having a smaller frame, there might be some things that you need to take on board in terms of mobility, in terms of range, that you might not have picked up through doing bodyweight exercises or running specific conditioning over the years, whatever it might be. So that's not to say that you should avoid strength work, but it's to say to be mindful of the movement patterns, make sure you're having people look over you, make sure you're being attentive with how you're moving and executing movements so that you can set yourself up to develop steadily rather than jumping into the deep end too fast too soon and letting the confidence that you have from being able to run a 17-minute 5k translate to sticking 4 plates on your back and being on a gym fail meme page online as you unfortunately destroy some spotter arms. The other main thing to consider there is when it comes to building body mass, building body weight, you're probably going to have to eat in a considerable surplus as you're building your strength volume alongside your running triathlon training, which is something that is a little bit more alien to the endurance community than it is to the bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman community. So make sure that you're paying attention to resources online, make sure you're up to speed with how you should be eating to best support your goals, coming from an endurance background into a strength training background, because eating for performance there's a lot of crossover with eating for body composition, body mass, but there's a few more things to consider that from what I've understood aren't as conventionally spoken about in running and triathlon circles. So there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, there's no right body shape, wrong body shape, right way to approach things. It's essentially just being mindful of your individual context and taking that into consideration when you are planning for the future, which is looking bright for each and every one of you. I can tell you that right now for free. I hope that's been informative. If you've enjoyed it, please give the video a like, please comment with your thoughts, feelings or suggestions down below, and hit subscribe because the sun is coming down. I have 400 meters to go, and I think a subscription would probably make it a lot easier. Truly. So now that you've done all those things, thank you very much for watching, and please do share your thoughts, feelings, experiences or suggestions in the comments down below. I need to set my watch to do 4 more reps. You're not going to watch me suffer through it. You've seen enough of my suffering today. Goodbye.